Hello, YouTube, and welcome to this discussion episode for this week. And the question this week that we're going to discuss vigorously and, find out, hopefully conclude something or other. We're just going to have a chit chat, matey, about is modern gaming or retro gaming better for your mental health? Now, obviously, there's two clear sides to this here. Obviously, we've heard that gaming is good for your mental health, and we've discussed that sort of before. We're sort of on that sort of page. But is it more the modern gaming or the retro gaming that's actually better out of the two? Shall we start with modern gaming then? So, what are the benefits do we think for mental health of modern gaming? Really, has anyone got anything they'd like to throw out?
Well, I think modern gaming tends to be a bit more involved than your older retro style games. So there's a lot more bigger topics, bigger kind of games overall, as in the complexity of the games. So if you want to get into that kind of mindset of like losing yourself in like an online world or the online community or that kind of thing, that's kind of like available to you in modern gaming. Whereas retro gaming was more, I'd say, insular because it was just on your computer at the time or your console or whatever. But there was still that social aspect because you got your mates round or you went round to your mates and you had all that kind of stuff. So I think modern gaming offers a more in-depth, thought-provoking style of gaming than what retro games did.
The games today are a little bit. I'm going to go with they're easier. They're not as taxing as punishing as the older games were. You have save states. You can set the difficulty level. So depending on if you're, for instance, one of the issues you have is flaring anger, you can actually save point, rewind, or go back. Whereas retro games, you couldn't. You had your 3 lives to get however far you needed to go. There was no saving. So most of the games, you couldn't change the difficulty. It was what it was.
But you see, as a counter argument there, don't modern games, we have modern golfing games that you play online together, and doesn't that induce rage into some people and ends up smashing up gear?
Don't know what you're talking about or referring to there, Chris. A golfing game is a very relaxing stroll around the course, putting with your friends. It's very convivial.
Okay, must have read something wrong there. Bit of fake news. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, modern games are quite good from what you're saying in that sense that they're immersive in storytelling and a bit more in depth. And like you say, I agree with what you're saying, Damien, with the easier mode because I like to play the easier mode, isn't it? Because sometimes you just want to relax. They help you relax, not get too hard, so you can just enjoy the story because they probably have better stories, essentially. Like say, because they're more in depth, like Sean said. So, what are the benefits do we think of retro games then? To help for your mental health, maybe they could offer you more than modern games.
I was going to say, well, it's broadly more about both modern and retro games to some degree, but there is also aspects of more related to modern gaming. So that I know that there have been some studies on the subject, not much though, and most people agree that more research needs to be done. But generally speaking, what people have been saying is that it can improve cognitive abilities. It can improve problem solving, and it can also have an effect on social connections. This can kind of go a little bit either way, but because a lot of modern games are online and you're playing with other people, it can add to your sort of social group. But because there's also a lot of games where there's a lot of screaming and shouting, it's not always the perfect solution. So yeah, modern games lean more on that social aspect, which is something that you don't really get quite so much with the retro games. Although, in terms of retro gaming, you were more likely to have your mates around at your house, so you're going to be playing with people you already knew, and you could strengthen those bonds. So, yeah, it's maybe leans a little bit more towards retro, I would say.
Well, yeah, but you're referring to retro gaming back then, as in as we played them back then. But we're talking about today, so playing retro games today. I think what retro games offer in playing in today's modern living is as Damien alluded to, they're more simple, sometimes extremely hard, but they're more simple, repetitive games. So like your platformers and that kind of stuff. So whereas your modern games can be a lot more complex, a lot more thought provoking. A lot of modern gaming, some of the topics that they deal with can be far ranging, from everything from the loss of family members to psychosis. I'm thinking of Hellblade, that kind of game. And there's all sorts of games which deal with all these kind of like mental health issues now. Whereas back then it was, your Manic Miners, your Sonic, your Marios, and that kind of just pure escapism, absolute brilliance. So it's horses for different causes, isn't it? I think your retro games are much more of your nostalgic, slip on a pair of comfy slippers and play that kind of stuff. Whereas your modern games are a bit more thought provoking, puzzle solving, lose yourself in that moment, because we can do that now, whereas we couldn't back then.
The worlds in modern games are almost realistic in essence. So, for instance, you could have your Call of Duty's, Battlefield, that kind of thing, which is great for some people. It's their escapism and it's a real world kind of looking environment and they're invoked into it. Whereas I suppose at the same time, it could also trigger PTSD.
Yeah, good point.
Because it's so real.
I'd probably go with retro gaming is another way to look at it. Is also it's sort of a disconnect. If you use the older systems anyway, if you do it on your PC, it's not the same sort of principle. But if you have these old consoles like I do as a retro gamer, half of them weren't wired up to the internet. And like as sort of Tim alluded to, like the social aspect or not social aspect, I suppose, is that you're connected with most games now, isn't it? Where you can get that abuse online, as it were, or ridicule. There's a whole social thing. Whereas you didn't really get that before unless you invited an annoying mate over, but you could tell them to leave the house, But you can plug in these old consoles like your Mega Drive or something that's not hooked up to the internet and play those games yourself then and still get the benefits of a relaxing, calming stuff for your health and the story. Okay, maybe not as more detailed stories you get nowadays, but a story, isn't it, to help you with your relaxation and your mental health in that state. But then you're also away from the social pressures, isn't it, online, which can be a bit of a distraction. What do we think to that point, or am I just jabbering, gentlemen?
No, I think you're spot on with that assessment. But if you want that social interaction, modern day games gives you the variety of speaking to anyone almost anywhere in the world. Whereas the retro stuff, you were kind of stuck to the group of mates you had. But having said that, some modern day systems allow you to use NetPlay now, so you can actually do something similar. Yeah, I, I suppose it depends on the individual as to their condition nature of what they're after. For instance, me, I'm quite happy to sit and play the retro stuff in the comfort of just me and the game and losing myself in whatever that's presenting with the story that it is. But at the same time, when I play the modern games, I quite like to play the multiplayer aspect where you're working together to reach a goal. For me, the modern stuff is the communal aspect, and the retro gaming is it's my private time, if you like. I think that's how I associate the retro to modern. But I think it's everyone to their own.
Well, yeah, to your point, Damien, we've just recently done a series of videos on our gaming history. So we've obviously all delved back into our history for looking at that. And whilst I was doing my video, the nostalgia of just looking back to the various computers and consoles that I'd played, and then just that provoking those memories of, oh my God, yeah, I remember playing this. Oh my God, I remember when this happened, and da 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 da. Obviously, that's very positive from a mental health perspective. But yeah, you're right. That isn't something that I particularly wanted to share with people online. I mean, I know I'm talking about it now, but as in a playing with people over line, online. So I wanted to play an old Commodore 64 game or something like that. That was me sort of back in that moment, almost reliving that memory and getting a lot of positive memories from it and a lot of positive feelings. So yeah, I think the retro gaming from that perspective is very powerful. If you've already experienced that and have those memories, playing it nowadays as a retro enthusiast, maybe you went around it sort of in the 80s and 90s to play these games, and you're playing them now for the first time, sort of retrospectively. See what I did there? So I don't really know, but modern gaming, on the opposite side of the coin, offers so much more now than it ever could have before, because of the internet, because of the CPUs now, the graphics, the just the whole plethora around games now, the thousands of people it takes to produce these AAA titles. You know, what we're playing with now is just light years from what it was back then, and the opportunities are tenfold.
Basically, with us lot banging on about retro games, if it hadn't been for me, we could basically just recreate the Four Yorkshiremen sketch from Monty Python. You know, back in my day, we had permadeath in our games. You had it easy. We had it proper rough. Unfortunately, I'm not a Yorkshireman, so it doesn't really count. But what I was going to say was that I did skim over a study done by Oxford University in 2022, which looked at 40,000 gamers, I think it was, over the course of 6 weeks, and the effects on mental health through playing games. Now, it didn't make any distinctions between modern and retro gaming. I think the games that it looked at were mostly modern. Although it did look at, you know, whether they were multiplayer, single player, and more or less the outcome of it was that it really doesn't have very much, if any, effect on mental health, except for one particular circumstance, which is if people feel compelled to play, which I assume is sort of alluding to a sort of game addiction, which I assume is a thing. I've not come across that in my life, but you know, that sounds like it's the only instance where you are likely to get somebody whose mental health is seriously negatively affected by video gaming. So I'm not sure if there is much of a distinction between modern and retro games, but
Well,
that was the only point that I've seen.
it's funny you should bring that up because loot boxes. Didn't get them in retro games. You get them in modern games. You pays your money as a gamble for what the content is. So in essence, that's technically gambling, which could be bad for some people.
And is addiction forming.
And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Tetris designed to invoke addiction to keep you playing it?
Possibly.
Quite possibly.
I mean,
It certainly worked if that was the case.
Yeah, it was the most popular game, wasn't it, on the Game Boy, I think. So, yes, it probably was. But right, guys, so we can end the discussion, and it just had to be clear cut. It's a yes for retro or a yes for modern gaming, or is it a bit of both? What we're going to. So, retro, modern, or both, Damien?
I think both. It caters for the retrospective of the individual. So to me, it is both.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's both of them. It's retro and it's all gaming. It's, you know, if that's your passion and that's what you enjoy, then more power to you. But it's the same as every passion, whether your interest is fishing, gambling, drinking, computer gaming, whatever it is, it needs to be done in moderation and it needs to be done healthily. So
got to agree with Sean on that. Moderation is key. And if you think you've got a problem, if you think you're suffering with anxiety, depression, your sleep pattern's messed up, that kind of thing, tell somebody. Ask for help. Doesn't hurt.
yeah, talk.
But that said, I'm going to say that in some regards, modern games are more stressful, and in some regards, retro games are more stressful. There's nothing worse. I mean, the thing that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of modern games is DayZ, because that is permadeath, which is also the problem with retro games, getting that permadeath. Yeah, you may have 3 lives in a retro game, but it's still permadeath. You've got so far and that's it, game over. And that builds anxiety, that builds stress, but that also builds interest in the game, and you become invested in it, and you become invested in a character, which I can't argue is a bad thing necessarily. So I've never been more stressed in my life other than playing DayZ. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's a bit of both, really. I probably lean a little bit to more retro because I do believe in that sort of disconnect. If you can have an older system, so you're not online all the time, because I think that does cause a stress in it, constantly looking at your phone and society and social media generally in that respect. But ultimately, they're both good. I think gaming is good for your mental health and everything, so it could go either way. But what do you think, people watching this video? Write down in the comments down below what you think. You think it's good or not? Which one do you prefer? Is it modern gaming, retro gaming, or a bit of both as well? Do you agree with what we said, or do you think we're talking absolute rubbish? Write it in the comments down below, and then we can have that interaction between you and, well, us guys, because that's what makes YouTube very, very special. Oh, it does on this channel anyway. But brilliant. Thanks for the discussion, gentlemen, and we'll have another one next week. But until next time, bye-bye.
like and subscribe.
Bye.